Oh, did you say you're ready? Okay. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the February 26th, 2024 Policy Committee meeting. I would like to call this meeting to order. I know everybody's had a chance to look at the agenda. It's been posted for some time, so we're going to move on with the agenda as posted. New business is public comment on agenda items. Do we have any public comment on agenda items? I don't think so. So I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Graham for policies for reviews to get us started.
Thank you. We are going to start with policy BCB, board member conflict of interest. This is one that had not been updated in several years and had several recommended updates per the model. I will give everybody a chance to look through those, but two things that I wanted to bring to your attention and make suggestions on differing from the model. One is under the nepotism portion, which is on, I believe, page 2 near the top. The definition there is different than the definition that we use in our nepotism personnel policy, which requires that people who are related to board members disclose that in their application, as well as board members not being able to vote on discipline related to them, etc. So it would be my recommendation that we make those two lists align, which includes spouse, child, parent, brothers and sisters-in-law, parents-in-law, and grandchildren, as specifically defined in that policy. So that would be a recommendation outside of the model that we make that change.
I agree with that recommendation.
And the other thing that I specifically wanted to bring to the attention of the board was under employment and volunteering. You will see that, which is within the statute, that board members are not allowed to receive pay as a teacher of the district, but it goes on to talk about other types of employment up to and including coaching, volunteering, etc. The reason for that is based on an Attorney General's opinion, which is referenced there from 2016, essentially saying that when you are both a board member, you are over the principal of a school, and then you go to the school where the principal is in charge of the volunteers and the employees within that building. And it makes that relationship very complicated. So I know that that is important to some of our board members to be in school. Some of our board members are parents and volunteer in that capacity. So I wanted to bring it to your attention. Attorney General's opinions are just opinions. They are not law. They are an interpretation of the law by the Attorney General at that time. So I will defer to the committee on how they want to proceed with that, but it was a significant change, so I wanted to mention it.
Yeah, I was going to bring this up as well. I know we've discussed this previously in the past. I know Ashley probably does have some feedback to share on this as well. So we might want to table it until she's back in the room possibly.
We can certainly,
if you don't mind.
sure.
But I mean, I'm happy to share my thoughts as well temporarily, or do you want to just wait to have the
Why
discussion?
don't we just table this full policy so we don't go back and forth, if that's okay? All right. So then we will move on. So just hold off on that one. We will move on to BJR. This policy is board legislative program. And it is suggested for review because it made a specific reference to the National School Board Association, which we are no longer a part of. We did thought that we had removed that from all of our policies, but this one came to light. So we wanted to address that as well as some very few other minor changes that are in there.
Additional concerns with the changes? I think they're fine. Do you have any?
No.
Anybody else? Have anything else they'd like to share? All right, I think those are good to come out of committee for first reading.
Great, thank you. Next is CCB. This policy is line and staff relations. This was a much older policy that had not been updated quite some time. And so you'll see there are a good number of changes here. The primary recommendation that I had other than the model was that they call it faculty advisory committee, and that's not what we call our teacher liaison program. And so I would just recommend that we make that match our language. Other than that, you all can view the changes there proposed by the model.
Ours is would it just remain teacher liaison?
I think so.
Right?
Dr. Evans, teacher liaison. Yes, that's what I thought as well.
If you just give me a moment to look it over. And please, if you have any questions or see anything, feel free to jump in.
Okay.
That goes for y'all too, Miss Barbara and Evan. Under the future relationship with the principal, just understanding the language change from superintendent from board to superintendent, is that just because that's more aligned with our practice or?
Because the superintendent is responsible for principals and the staff within the schools administrative.
Yeah. And we're mostly just updating this one to just, because it hasn't been addressed in a while.
Correct.
No issues with this policy, do you need this now? This is, so take them out of meeting for first meeting.
Thank you. Next is going to be CF. And this one is recommended for deletion because there is no model policy, CF, at the time. As you can see, this one is a much older policy. It was once a model CF. At this time, there is not. The information in this policy is covered in several other policies regarding division of responsibilities between the board and the superintendent. However, if it were the will of the board to keep this policy, I don't see anything amiss with the language in the policy as it is, other than removing the purpose, which we are doing for all of our policies.
I almost well left. What about you, Evan? Do you have any? I would like to at least have like a majority of the board to decide to delete it before I just go ahead. I mean, I guess it does have to go for first
It
reading.
would still go for first and second.
And what other policies is this referenced in? Do you know?
I do not know off the top of my head, I'm sorry. There are several regarding the division of responsibility between superintendent and board. I believe CBC, the superintendent's duties and responsibility. And CB, school superintendent.
I don't necessarily see the need for deletion. I'm pretty indifferent. Do you have any?
No, I just thought that was commonly known,
Right.
as you said, through other policies, but.
It's, I think it's captured in board and superintendent responsibilities already.
So, I mean,
It is, yes.
I'm fine with that. You can move it
It's
to
just-
first reading.
It's just.
I know, it's just redundant. I get it.
And just in keeping with the model policies, that was kind of where it came from, because when I requested the model for it, there was not one, so. Okay, next we have JIC. It is student conduct.
Did we recently, I think we recently had this policy, did we not?
We did not, we addressed JICDA, Student Code of Conduct, which brings me exactly to my point that this is incredibly repetitive
Yes.
of JICDA. And so we had both JIC and JICR and JICDA and JICDAR, which is student conduct and its administrative rule, and student code of conduct and its administrative rule. And so it is the recommendation that we remove JIC as well as its administrative rule, but I do want to kind of cover that separately because there is some information in there.
Is everything that's in JIC covered in JICD? Okay,
JICDA, yeah.
or yeah. Yes. Many times.
There is currently no model for JIC either.
And having just revisited the last one, I know it's pretty thorough, so I'm fine with that out of committee for this. Anybody else has any? Dr. Wilson, any of you? Okay, please jump in if I don't call on you or you have something to say, don't.
right, so we will move that one forward to first reading? Okay. Next, we are going to address JICR, the administrative rule. And I do want to bring this one to your attention because there is no model for this one. The language is, you will see, exactly repetitive of JIC and also JICDA. However, there is information near the bottom of this policy on the SKIP program, which is specific to our districts. That's not in the model policy. And some of that information was conflicting with SKIP information in other policies as well as our practice with SKIP. And so we are recommending that this policy JICR be deleted, and we are moving the information regarding SKIP to JICDAR, which we can look at together or when we get to that alphabetically.
Give me those minutes again, can you move it?
There's so many JICs, right?
So the recommendation would be to delete JICR, and the information from that policy about SKIP would be moved to JICDAR. And so if you are so inclined, we can go ahead and flip over to JICDAR so that you can see how that language is transferred over.
Okay, I see it underneath.
It's pretty far down in that policy, just because that's where it logically went in the policy. And you will see that that information is significantly the same to what was in JIC, but some of the details of how we use the program have been modified.
Would you like to outline those in any way?
Sure. And Dr. Wilson, please feel free to step in if I misstate or.
JICDA dash. So what they did is they took the rule and they're recommending deletion and putting it all here where there's red.
Gotcha.
And then, so that's going to be basically the same, but a little different. So if you would like to touch on the differences and ask why, that would be beneficial just for the community.
Of course. So first, in that first paragraph under that section, it talks about being referred for behavior counseling, et cetera, when prior interventions have been documented. Includes attendance problems, and so that is recommended to be changed to students may be referred to SKIP program to address problem behaviors or drug and alcohol use. In practicality, this program is primarily to address drug and alcohol use. And so that is really the more appropriate use of the program. They're really not intended to address attendance issues.
We address attendance issues in other ways, so
Correct.
no need.
As well, you'll see that the next section in the original policy talks about students will only receive 2 referrals and they cannot be in consecutive years. So that is the same information, but just stated a bit more clearly. And then, talk about, apologize, I just want to make sure I hit all the differences here.
I guess while we're on that one, is there, because I don't know the background to this, is there a reason why we say you can only refer twice in consecutive years?
I believe, if I recall correctly, that is based on SKIP's requirements because they felt like if it was not successful in a short period of time, you shouldn't just send a student back to the same intervention. They might need a
So
different.
maybe like that they would need additional intervention or something different, because clearly that is not serving its desired purpose.
I believe that was the intent there.
And if then, like, if you're limiting it, what happens if then they're not given access to that? Or they get like, you know what I mean? Like,
What do you mean?
I guess if they can,
Yes.
Yes.
The type of skill.
like, yeah.
I mean, our hearing officers have broad authority to order students to participate in a variety of things. So they
Okay.
could come up with another program. I mean, we have a relationship with SKIP. Typically, if a student has been referred there twice, there are other interventions that are needed in other ways. So
So you say that SKIP has more than one type of
There-
interventional?
I believe that they do have sort of a base level and then a more intense level within their programming. Is that right, Dr. Wilson? I don't want to misstate their program.
I can't give the specifics, but I do know there's another level, but
Okay.
the student would still have to be referred to SKIP in order to get to the other level. I guess that's my concern, that this will
Well, that's what I'm saying. So what happens then
Right, yeah.
with that student? Like,
Well, I mean,
okay, Skip's not working, he's been there twice, and
For a cost associated with it.
there is a cost associated with SKIP.
Is that part of the?
They work with families, and do payment plans, et cetera. But they do have a cost. It's part of the contract that the board signs with, Dorchester County Drug and Alcohol. And so, I don't know that the district doesn't really have authority to issue students to receive other types of mental health treatment. So beyond that, our hands are a bit tied in terms of interventions. We don't have authority to order students to more restrictive placement.
It may not be her intent, but I'm trying to understand. It says, what happened to that student after he had not been successful? Does he get to come back to school regardless or?
So SKIP is an ongoing program for a period of time, depending on what level they're in. And so typically they would be returned to our schools, either in their home school or at Rise. While they are completing the program, it would be ordered concurrently with another disciplinary action from time to time. So you'll actually see that it talks about students being able to continue at school on probation. We are recommending deletion of that portion of the policy because the hearing officer makes a recommendation as to what the student is doing during the time that they also attend SKIP. So SKIP is after school. It does not interfere with their education. And so they would continue in whatever their placement is during the school day. And then they would also go to SKIP in the afternoons.
So if they did, I guess my question again is, if they don't successfully complete the program,
So it does say here that if they do not successfully complete the program, if they are removed from the program for violations of SKIP's rules, then they would be referred back to the hearing officer for further disciplinary action if
so it
appropriate.
goes back. Gotcha.
all right, I'm fine with the deletion and going out for first reading as well as the updated policy.
So we're ready to move both
Okay.
JICR for deletion and the
Yeah.
JICDAR with the recommended changes. Okay, next is going to be JICA. Dress code.
I know, did you ask her?
I'm sorry, was there a question?
She was saying she didn't know if Ashley was coming back in,
Oh,
but we're not on that one.
yeah, just a couple more and then we can, address that one.
We can sort of-
Yeah, we can circle back.
I mean, it's fine. I already know. She has the same concerns I do, so it's fine.
Okay. So we can look at JICA, which is the dress code policy. This one has not been updated in quite some time, so you'll see there are a good number of language changes. The outcome is very similar. One thing that I do want to point out here is that we did request feedback from principals regarding this policy. And the recommendation from the principals, as well as something that bothered me, was this portion about new and transfer students, saying that they are exempt from the dress code for up to 5 days. I think that was a concern. I think that it is in here because if you review the model policy as relevant to some other districts, it talks about uniforms. Because we don't have uniforms in most of our schools, that is not relevant to us. So I think it is an attempt to allow a new or transfer student to be out of uniform for a period of days. But based on our dress code policy, there's really no reason why a student shouldn't be expected to follow our dress code policy on day one. And certainly, I think our administration would be understanding and helpful, providing the student an opportunity to change if they were out of dress code on their very first day without any disciplinary action. So the recommendation would just be to remove that last paragraph there.
I can agree on that. But I do have a concern. I have visited some of these schools and apparently there is no dress code.
So I think,
So how do we,
I think that's part of why we're revisiting the policy, because it hasn't been updated since 2000. And I think part of the intent, when Ashley and I originally, you were the policy chair, so sorry, you just walked in. Recommended bringing this up to review was basically kind of to check, see if it's still relevant, A, and B, kind of allow the community and schools to know, hey, we've looked at it, we take it seriously, this is something we still would like to see enforced. So I don't know if you'd like to speak anything on that additionally, Ashley, coming from the last discussions we had or not, but did you get a chance to review this policy?
Yes, so, I did. So what, I'm sorry, will you repeat what you just said?
So she was concerned that currently the dress code as it stands is not enforced. And I was just explaining that that's part of why we wanted to revisit the policy. Yes. And so essentially, we just wanted to make sure it still made sense for today's world, right? Like, and then B, that the understanding of what was the expectation was like, hey, this has been updated, revisited and passed, so it's just as relevant now. You know, does that make sense?
I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
I'm just saying the amount of bare skin that I see when I walk in that building is,
I agree.
I have an issue with.
So hopefully us revisiting.
Yeah.
And
Acknowledge
acknowledging.
get JSCAR, that's when we get into some of the specifics about what's allowed and what's not, so, yeah.
Ms. Powell, just so you know, in our cabinet meeting today, we talked about the dress code, and tomorrow we have our district admin meeting. We're gonna, it's an agenda item as well, because you can have great policies, but you don't enforce them. And so that is gonna be a very progress.
And I'm not I'm not saying they have to dress like Puritans, but
Yes.
well, certain things happen because, there's that cause and effect. And so we don't want any of that to be the result of some of our students getting in trouble. And besides, it's not a playground, it's not the beach. So,
It's hard too, because I think, I mean, I've noticed when I go shopping, I look at the clothes and I'm like, where's the other half of this? I mean, it seems to be
Even as adult women.
missing part of it. So I know that what is out there right now, it makes it even more difficult because the style and, I've seen that.
You all find
Very-
it very interesting, but I have a student advisory council, and we talked about this a couple months ago. And ironically, it was the girls saying, is this going to be enforced consistently? Because now the boys' shorts are short as well. And
It's all
so,
short. It is
yeah,
short.
and so I was dumbfounded when
We
they said.
actually just saw something that, was that where we were, there was like a rule that men's shorts had to be a certain length, and we were just like shocked that that was a thing. And we were like,
Well, I do think it adds to the overall culture of
Yes.
the, and just the setting, the feeling, all of that. It's important. It plays a big role. So it is very important.
Dr. Robinson, are we discussing that tomorrow? Or you
Well,
want to
like as
discuss,
far as.
discuss the teacher?
I'd like
Yes,
Because that's
are we, Mr. Doherty?
to-
very inappropriate.
Because that came out today too.
I mean, I just,
Yeah.
Just don't want to get up from the chair.
I've mentioned it several times over the years.
I just wanted you all to know that we're discussing it already. too.
Yeah, and I think one of the other things is obviously, this doesn't necessarily need to be said, but then it's consistent, because these kids, I mean, they talk to each other, they know what's going on in other schools. And so I think it has to be consistently enforced across every school. Otherwise, it makes it very difficult for one school to try to enforce it. Does that make sense? Yeah.
I'm fine with that going out to committee, or do you want to support out to the first reading, but do you want to address the rule first
Watch
before?
our student.
Sure, typically we do policy and rules separately, so that sometimes they get pushed. With the change of removing the new and transfer student.
I can remove that. Thank you.
Great. And then the next would be JICAR. This is the administrative rule, which goes with that, which gives a little more definition to the dress code. And again, I do have some feedback from some of the principals that I would like to share here.
Absolutely.
So the first of which is on the first bullet point. The principals indicated that from time to time, students will use makeup to cover their entire face, or wear masks that cover their entire face. I'm not referring to a cloth mask that students may wear for health issues, but like a Halloween style mask that covers their entire face. And so there is a recommendation to add language there that nothing can be used that would cover so much of their face that you can't,
Oh, you're saying
to
add
identify them, et cetera.
Okay, I was looking for it. I'm like, I don't see anything.
No, it would be a recommendation to add
Okay,
that.
so add, what would the verbiage?
I have some proposed language here, give me just a second.
Sorry, I was looking for where it said that.
That's okay.
It's like confusing.
Clothing, jewelry, makeup, and accessories that cover the student's face and impede the student's ability, the staff's ability to easily identify the student. But
I
that-
agree. I have seen that firsthand as well. So I support putting that. On. Yes.
Any other concerns with that one?
That specific.
That specific, I have others.
Like,
Okay.
no concerns with that. That one is fine. And you can put it in this.
Okay, I'm just adding where it has sleepwear or lounge pants. Could you also include those bunny shoes or whatever they are that they're wearing?
Well, I was going to get into
To delete that.
Actually, several of the principals asked that that be removed from the policy as a prohibited item. They felt like they are not revealing, they are comfortable for students, and they said that they prefer that over many of the things, not the slippers, but the, what's written, the pajamas, they wear lounge pants. They said that in all honesty, they prefer the students wear that over some of the other things they're choosing. to
What
wear.
they're jumping?
So, yeah.
Well, why don't we go through
That's just
in
a.
order
Okay.
first, and once we get to that, we'll discuss that, if that's okay.
Sure.
Okay.
There's actually not much else in that list that there
Okay,
were
is that
concerns about
specific?
from the administration, yes.
Okay,
But if there are concerns with the board in that, we can certainly talk.
okay, let's,
I'd like to add something. Flip flops, like in the elementary school, I know the high school might be another question, but in elementary schools, kids cannot. There's more access with flip flops.
I think that needs to be a school, discretionary thing. Does anybody else have an opinion on that? I don't know. I don't want to.
From a liability standpoint, if I had my way, I'd make everybody wear non-slip tennis shoes at the time, but apparently people don't like that.
I mean, I'm fine with it being.
I think that it does become really difficult to enforce specific types of shoes, although I do agree that sometimes they cause issues.
They do. I mean, I've always said my kids shoes, but is that something?
I will tell you that the last time we attempted to address the question of flip-flops, it turned into what is a flip-flop, what is a sandal, what is a croc, which one of these things are appropriate?
I mean, that
which
is true,
things
because
are not
now-
appropriate.
especially for
Closed-toed
girls.
shoes.
Like a shoe that they slide on.
Flip flop is what goes between your toes, just that flat rubber thing.
Yeah.
With a Croc, you can use the heel strap, you know.
The only thing I would recommend if we were going to address shoes to that degree would be closed-toed shoes. You know what I mean? Something of that nature, if that was like a concern, but you know what I mean? Because there's like sandals that, most anything that has closed toes has like some sort of rear strap on it, like you don't for access to that, but I'm fine with leaving that off, that I'll leave that to the will of the board if anybody else feels very passionately about adding that. As far as sleepwear and lounge pants, anybody have any dialogue on that? Are we okay with?
And I will say that all the other rules would still apply. So obviously, if someone was wearing sleepwear that was inappropriate fitting, too tight, spaghetti straps, et cetera, then that wouldn't be appropriate because it's already not appropriate by the other. rules. I think the biggest thing that it's addressing is specifically the sort of like flannel-y pajama pants.
I'm torn because I understand the expectations for being presentable, like typically you don't go to work and wear lounge pants or sleepwear. But I also understand there's worse things in the world than wearing pajama pants, and I'm not that worried about it. Honestly, if it's the will of the board, and then there's a majority or anybody else feels strongly about keeping sleepwear as not being allowed,
I just don't think it's, you're sleeping, you're not sleeping.
We're supposed to be trying to set an example, to require certain types of clothing, I would think, so that we are preparing them for the future. And you wearing the pajamas.
See, I'm a millennial, so I was like right in between that, like.
Too many.
Pajamas.
Yes, I mean, it's a trend now.
Okay, so as a principal, or former principal, do you think it's a reasonable expectation to,
You start saying pajamas, you're going down a slippery slope. What is it? You know, what's acceptable, what's not acceptable. You know, because they're gonna come in and say, well, these are the jumps. I want them in the jump section. And then now you got,
Sweatpants or sweatpants.
now you gotta get into debate, what is, what isn't. Kind of like the flip flop.
That's a question.
Like jerseys,
Sweatpants.
sweatpants, and, but those are in the pajama section.
But that's the hard part right now, is,
I mean.
I get it.
personally, I'll cover, that's good.
That would come up more than.
I mean, that's 2 thumbs up. I mean,
I think I think it's ambiguous to say sleepwear. Because sleepwear is a lot of different things for a lot of different,
Yes.
Yeah.
and it
So
doesn't.
do you think we should
I think it should be,
remove both sleepwear and pajamas? I'm in favor of that, and I know we don't think, so is everybody okay with removing sleepwear or lounge pants?
they still have the caveat of the bottom, which. we
What has
always
to
had.
be appropriate.
Yeah, exactly. If the administration deems it inappropriate, you always have a
Yes.
fail safe.
Yes.
But
Yes.
it's,
I think mostly my major concerns are inappropriate exposure, and obviously a lot of the other things that are addressed in the beginning of the,
What about pants down to the butt?
that's addressed.
Yeah.
It's addressed. It says that it must be worn at their natural waist. Yeah, that's inappropriate.
So the next concern, was in the second paragraph after the bullet points that starts short skirts, skirts, etc. There is, in that second sentence, it referenced outer garments that are worn over tights or leggings. And there was concern expressed that leggings are not otherwise addressed in the policy. And it becomes very questionable as to, obviously over tights, that is different. Lots of students wear leggings without those sorts of coverings. And so by including this in here, you are essentially saying that a legging is an accessory, not a type of clothes. And there was concern for the principals about enforcement of that, I think.
That's inappropriate.
I also think that the other concern that comes with that is that it varies by age, which makes it hard to enforce and at what point, because at JICA, the policy says that it will not be enforced differently based on your body type, your size, et cetera. And so some people may find that appropriate in younger students or students with certain body types and less appropriate in older students or students with different body types. So that becomes a very difficult line for our administrators to enforce.
It's just inappropriate to wear just leggings. Something else.
Is the recommendation to remove
The reference to leggings and just kind
entire?
of.
From there, because it's not addressed.
So the rest of the sentence would stay that outer garments that are worn over tights are to follow the same length exceptions. So essentially, if you're wearing a dress over your tights, it has to follow the same length exception that is listed for short skirts, et cetera. Like we're gonna get to address what that.
leggings in the policy.
And again, it goes back to, there's already information in here that says if your clothes are inappropriately tight and it can be addressed, but leggings are different. I would say that's a difficult topic all around.
I agree, however,
I know, it's very.
like you said, that we're all thinking it.
what's that, Kim?
Can you move forward though?
I hear that. None of us heard. Yeah.
Yes, it is tricky word.
Talking about teachers.
Another argument I always heard, parents and students,
Leggings right now.
that girl's jeans just as tight as my leggings.
Say that again.
That girl's jeans are just as tight as those leggings.
Yeah.
They show it just as much as. So I mean, it's like I said,
I think the goal is to make sure children are dressed appropriately. I don't see harm in leggings any more than I do pajama pants, honestly. I don't know.
Just want something to cover those leggings. I don't want them to just wear leggings in there. I want them to cover it. Like let wear it under a skirt or a dress or something, but not just leggings by themselves up to their waist.
It's not.
Well, they make them now, they look almost like pants.
I do think that's very difficult.
That actually is very true. There are some pants
They're called
that
leggings.
look like leggings. And they're not really leggings, they're pants. So it is
Or vice
tricky.
versa.
And this is not as simple. I mean, really, that is true. I agree.
And there's leggings that look like pants.
I mean, I think it
Yeah, they-
defers back to the building administration to figure out whether it is disruptive
Appropriate.
I agree.
Appropriate.
Can we
Whether it's
please leave that to the
disruptive.
administration?
and whether
Would
they.
be removing it from this?
Yes.
Can we go back to the second bullet at the top?
Sure.
Want to make sure that that bullet matches what's in policy, in the policy JICA or the,
Yes. What are we missing?
I think it matches. It says on the basis of, in the rule, it says race, religion, sex, color, disability, or national origin, but it says for in the policy.
What is,
So I think that it is referring to, that the policy will be enforced without regard to a student's race, religion, et cetera. And then this is talking about not being demeaning to their race, religion, sex, color, disability, or national origin.
okay, I see what you're saying.
So there are two different listings of,
One's talking about you're not being discriminated against that versus one is saying you can't have a tire that is disrespectful to.
Like t-shirts. Say.
but, I mean, we could make them match, but, there wouldn't be harm in making the match. That would include things like you can't wear shirts addressing people's body size. I mean, that's probably not appropriate anyway, but it's not a protected class. So I'm sorry?
If you want some on a t-shirt or what's on the t-shirt, you'd have to be.
I think it's fine to keep it a protected class right now, honestly.
The next point was back in that same paragraph that we were looking at the leggings. You'll see there that there is an option in the model policy. And so there are several things that are listed here as the potential option. Our administration would like to see that either be the tip of the longest finger with your arms by your sides or the fingers fully extended tip of the thumb. Not anything that requires measuring. We do not support the 5-inch because no one wants to be doing that.
I don't think we should be measuring, and I agree with the fingertip. I don't know if there's like a better way to really measure that, honestly. I remember girls are like, but I have really long arms. Yeah.
Wait a second.
Yes.
Yeah. I know we've all been there. But I think honestly, that's probably the most universal, best way to make that determination. So I'm fine with removing anything that requires measuring and keeping that other standard.
So there are two different ones here. One is the tip of your longest finger, or one is the tip of your thumb, the longest finger, the longest fingers.
And gosh, I didn't think this was gonna be.
Dress codes are always tricky.
Yes, they are.
Signatures are up there, Keisha.
It does say here that bedroom slippers are not permissible, so if
I
that
agree
helps
with
anybody
that.
feel better about that.
No,
Bedroom slippers are not permissible shoes.
We'll let you do the jammy pants, but we won't let you do the slippers. Is that a fair compromise? Fair compromise? I say no to the slippers, unless it's, I have a question though.
Yeah.
Can we put a stipulation unless it's like a pajama day?
Yes, so back in the original policy, it says that for special events.
Okay, it's because I'm like, slippers are fun every like now and again, but it shouldn't be the standard.
It's also for athletes in certain uniforms and things like that.
Okay.
Yes. All right, so the next section, the last thing that I want to address here is under the consequences disciplinary action at the very bottom of this policy.
Yeah.
So this is district specific information, and it is not appropriate towards not in line with our current discipline matrix. And so I would recommend, I have some recommended language for you.
Okay, for the first and second offense.
Yeah. And you'll see there, it's odd because it talks about like one offense, the parent gets free clothes, the second offense, you don't call the parent for clothes. It doesn't make any sense. So we are recommending for first offense, student will be sent to office or another location to secure a change of clothes. However they do that, they can call their parent. They might have one in their car. We might loan them clothes, whatever is appropriate there. And the student will make appropriate change before being allowed to return to class. And then this, for the second offense, additional or continued violations will be considered a discipline violation for refusal to obey. And the student may be placed in school suspension for the remainder of the day. Again, that is at the administrator's discretion based on the student's willingness to change their clothes to appropriate clothing or not. Any other concerns about that?
As long as the admin is consistent.
As long as it's in alignment with policy, you know what I mean? Like as long as it's actually enforcing that, not exactly.
And I think that a lot of it is about the refusal to obey. If they're asked, to put on something over and they do it, then typically I would assume, I'll refer to Mr. Farrell here, that may not warrant necessarily a disciplinary consequence if the student complies straight away.
When I'm back in the classroom. That's the whole
Because
point.
if they can't fix the problem, then they can't fix the problem. We can't have you walking around the building inappropriately.
I did want to go back up, so I thought of something, under the sunglasses or hats, can we include hoods? Or no, do we not want to include hoods under it? I know that's a huge issue.
You mean, please?
Like wearing your hoods during class, walking around school.
Yeah, that should be a no-no.
That it's not on there is what I'm saying.
I remember seeing a video one time that the policeman showed how many things they could hide in a hoodie.
Is it possible to, under the, like, students are prohibited from wearing sunglasses, hats, or hoods?
It's certainly possible, yes, and if that's the will of the board, we can add hoods there, yeah.
But
mean,
maybe it's in rotation.
You can identify their face.
You said you cannot?
It's not
Well,
safe.
I think it's a safety issue, which is why I wanted it in there. I actually feel like the hoods are almost worse than the hats, in my opinion, so I know that's probably like gonna be a difficult,
That's always been in there.
It has been in there.
okay,
You're
so,
fine.
yeah,
Every day,
am I missing it then? Is it?
something like.
I do not think that it was included in the new model, no, but we certainly can, yeah.
Sorry. Wanted to address that, and then, I am fine pending all those changes.
But I guess I just want to make sure it's clear that, they can wear a hoodie, they just can't have the hood on.
Yes, I will draft the.
Okay, but the language, yeah, so hoodie.
And is it like at all times on school grounds? Like once they're in a building or like,
Yeah, you don't want, I mean,
School grounds,
Yeah.
like you don't want.
inside the building.
Because if it's cold out.
So that's what I'm saying, like, can you,
Some kids wear that as their coat.
so I just wanted to be sure that like hats, like, obviously if you have a hat on, you're outside.
It's the appropriateness of it.
Fine. Like if you're on school grounds at a track practice and you're wearing a hat or a toboggan or a, it's your cold. Yeah, I just, inside a building, so I don't know, is that possible to make sure that that's clear?
Yes.
Did anybody else have any concerns or? Okay, so with those, all those changes, do you wanna?
I have them all here. If you want, I will make the changes and then upload them for first reading, so everybody will have an opportunity to review them, or I can talk through them now if you want.
Considering our time frame, I think that's.
Okay. Then I did want to go back to, BCD,
Sorry, Ashley, I had us table this.
save that one.
Yeah.
Right, so we mostly went through this one. I think that the portion that we were discussing was employment and volunteering prohibited. And Ashley, just for your information, we, discussed that was because the Attorney General's opinion from 2016 that's quoted there talks about, when a board member is acting as a board member and is a superior, they call it a master servant. That's just the law. It's not a great analogy for this day and age, that you are the top, and you are over the principals, but then when you go in the schools as a volunteer, you are under the principals because principals have authority within their schools. And so it creates friction in that relationship. And so that is the recommendation for the model. The statute does specifically reference that you cannot receive pay. So we already have that in our policy. But I think that the part that was kind of in question was the volunteering. So that's the basis, but I will turn it over to you guys. I did say that an Attorney General's opinion is just an opinion. It is the acting Attorney General's interpretation of the law and how it would be interpreted if there were to be a questioning.
I'm gonna just comment on it, and then I just wanted you to be here to add anything if there was anything you wanted to say. I think that, like you mentioned, we do have a lot of parents that are board members. We also probably will continue to have parents that are board members. I feel like we should be the example to our parents, volunteering in schools. I think that that's really important. I think as a board member, you shouldn't give that. In addition, I know plenty of our principals reach out to us to volunteer in the schools. So I think removing the inability to volunteer entirely is appropriate, and just leaving the employment conflict of interest.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think we do get asked as board members, even if we're not parents, to volunteer in the schools. I mean, perfect example, we have Reality Town coming up. I know we've all received multiple invitations to be a part of that. That is volunteering in the school. I think there's a lot of benefit to that, for the board member to be in the school, interacting with students and the staff, but also, for the school to have board members who are involved and interested and want to be there. So I think it's a win-win from both sides. And obviously, as a parent, I love to volunteer in my school, but I also think even if you have board members who aren't parents, there's value in it. And I think I like what Ms. Bates said too about setting the example, because obviously my background is PTA and volunteering, and I can't think of a better or more positive thing that we can do for our school than to recruit and have volunteers in there. And I think it's just, makes a huge difference to have that investment from our community and our families. So I feel pretty strongly about it personally.
I think maybe some of the question there becomes, because I actually, and until Christy kind of laid that out, I didn't understand why that would even be a problem. But I can see where it could be a problem. So is there a way to maybe somehow delineate? Because I think there's different types of volunteering, right? Because I think it's very realistic. If I volunteer to be the coach of a team, that very much is, that's a potential conflict, because then I'm under the principal. That's a very interesting dilemma.
Could that be at the school principal's discretion?
Well, so that's where I'm saying you delineate, because the other difference is you have volunteers for other organizations. There may be like mentor organizations. That's different. I'm not under the school at that point. Right?
But our volunteer policy says that anytime any volunteer comes in our school, they are subject to the discretion of the principal. So the principal has authority to enact board policies and to enforce their rules and regulations regarding volunteers. And so I think that's where the rub could come, not suggesting that it would, but it could.
I mean, I
The
think
principal and a board member disagreed about their appropriate role while they were.
But I think a board member who is behaving inappropriately, in any situation, regardless of it volunteering or anything else, needs to be addressed in some way. So, I think
But
that's.
I think that's to your point. That's where it gets tricky, because then how do you address that? Because you're gonna have.
It is tricky, and I don't necessarily think it's the principal who would address it. I think you're right, it's tricky. Who would address it? You're right.
I think it's the board that addresses it. We have avenues for holding each other. We govern and hold each other accountable, and I think that's the problem.
That's where it's like a policy that says the principal has to address it. So it's kind of an interesting.
Treating board members and volunteers separate from every other type of volunteer, I think. Right.
Well, I honestly believe you just need to know what your role is if you're in that school volunteering. You don't go in as if you're in charge, because you are not in charge. And I would be remiss if I did not say, I have been known to say, I think board members should be allowed to sub. Mr. Farrell knows I love subbing,
I agree with that.
and I would love to be able to go back and sub. And I could go to Charleston County, but I've been all my life here. So this is
Isn't
where
that
I'm
a law?
doing. I have no problem saying,
Not being paid is.
Mr. Farrell is the principal, and I don't have any authority other than that which everybody else has. But we won't change that, but I'm just saying.
Should be unpaid sub.
You could,
Well, then you'd be a volunteer.
Volunteer, Evan.
So unfortunately, it is law that you cannot be paid, although you technically volunteer to substitute.
But it's.
I don't think you can do a volunteer sub under our current policy,
I know.
because a substitute, we can also table this.
Look, I don't mean to be an argument. I'm just putting my little feelings out there. Y'all know how I am. I'm
Kara
terrible.
was out there the board 20-something years, and she used to go over in Berkeley County.
Time out.
Correct.
Are we okay
It's
with
not in another district.
Just for the, since it's 5:57.
Yeah.
I either would like to table this or I would like to move it for first reading, removing the volunteer, leaving the employment. Is everybody okay with taking it out for first reading, allowing board members to volunteer and leaving the employment, aspect on there? Are we good with that?
Yeah, I agree. I want both board members to volunteer. That's what I'm trying to say.
I understand what, no,
I think potentially what we may do, there could be some more research to be done. Maybe see what some other districts are doing and see if there's anything tricky that we need to think about.
Okay.
Because again, for the majority of us, it's not a problem.
Yeah.
But for board members in the future, when we're not here, you've got to also be careful.
So my suggestion would be to remove the volunteering aspect, keep the employment aspect, move all that to first reading, do research, and if we need to revisit again and address it in the future, we can always bring this back to committee. Because we still have other changes in here we need to address, right? And update.
I mean, there certainly are other changes. I don't know that any of them are.
Are we not okay with bringing this to first reading, leaving the volunteer option, taking off the employment option? Or do we just want to bring this to policy meeting next meeting again?
I think this is the first reading, you can always adjust.
Okay, well, I mean, first reading, we still have discussion. Please
Okay.
remove the volunteering for now.
And I would leave the part that until this includes employment handled by third-party entities, et cetera, and just remove the part a board member is not permitted to serve in a volunteer position.
Leave.
Remove that last, yes.
All right. Well, is there any public comment on non-agenda items? No, and seeing none, I adjourn this meeting.
It's one of the most exciting meetings I've had.